Hello, welcome back to the Cubase Fundamentals course. Today we're going to do a bit more MIDI recording. It's such a massive subject. I'm just trying to break it down into bite-sized chunks. If you're enjoying this series and you'd like to help support me and my channel, check out the Patreon link below. If you sign up, you'll be able to download each copy of this project as each episode's released. Okay, what are we doing today? We're going to record some lines using the piece piano sound that we introduced recently, and I'll show you some of the features that you can use to manipulate that data. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. I'm just going to get rid of that arpeggio line that we were playing with last time. It doesn't really have a place in the song, it was just for demo purposes. And I don't like this A minor in the chord track. I'm going to switch it to an F major, I think it sounds nicer. Get a little bit of a chord walk down thing going on. Then what I'm going to do is cycle over 8 bars from 5 to 13. Now what I'm going to do is set Cubase recording and leave it looping over those 8 bars. But I want to record basically some solo stuff. I'm going to record some music in, but I don't want it to put all of the notes in the same part. Basically every time it loops around, I want it to create a brand new MIDI part and create lanes for each one of those MIDI parts. The way we do that is in the options at the bottom in the transport control, and we want to engage new parts stacked. That means it's going to create brand new independent copies for each one of those. In addition, as it's going, it'll mute all of the previous parts, so only the last recorded part will be audible. Now, even though there are lots of options in this menu, and we do need to talk about them all at some point, we're just going to keep to this one for today. Now, this piece piano line is currently being used by the chord track. It is now. I wanted that to be specifically piece piano. I don't want to record data on that track if the chord track's using it as well, because you get MIDI conflicts if you play the same note on the same instrument twice, then they tend to conflict. So I'm just going to leave this track completely alone for the chord track to play those chords over the top of, which means I need to create myself a new track. So I'll do that now. Now, I'll be absolutely honest with you, I can't remember if I've told you about duplicate selected tracks without data, a function I use all of the time. It's basically my go-to copy. I very rarely copy an entire track, because if there's data on it, you don't want the data replicated more often than not. So make sure you've got a keyboard shortcut set up for that. I do. And here's my new track. Note that it's not record enabled by default. It just seems to be a function of the duplicate method. So I'll just record enable it. And now I've got a second copy of piece piano, and I'm leaving the chord track completely alone. Let's record some stuff. Okay, so I just recorded 3 completely different parts there. It was all just completely off the top of my head. Now, I don't want to get too hung up on what the notes actually were today. It's going to be a good vehicle for me to demonstrate some of the stuff that you can do in Cubase. So you can see that as things stand right now, you can only hear that last part that was played. But the other 2 parts have only been muted. If I select my mute tool and unmute them, because this is a polyphonic instrument, it's going to play all 3 of those. Okay, bit of a train wreck. Let's see what we can do to improve that. First thing that I'm going to do is select all the parts, If I look at them in the editor, you can see that it's actually overlaid all of the parts on top of each other. You can only ever edit one part at a time, and you can see that those notes are the highlighted ones. The ones that are shaded are the two parts that are currently inaccessible. If I click on one of those currently shaded notes, Cubase will select that part. We can't tell which one it is because they're all currently highlighted and need to continue to be highlighted in order for us to have this view. But each time I click on one of these notes, it will select the corresponding part, and then you can edit the notes in that part. I'm going to select everything on all three parts. I'm going to quantize, and I'm also going to quantize lengths. That will have improved things slightly, but it's still a bit of a mess. Got quite a few immediately adjacent notes that are sounding dissonant. There's quite a few things to fix. Well, even though we currently have the independence of these parts, and that's a great thing, and we want to be able to edit them, I specifically asked Cubase to do this, we might change our mind and want to merge all of those three parts together. Well, we can. I select the lanes that I want to merge together and click MIDI, Bounce MIDI. This is the option we want. Squashes all those three things together. Now, Bounce MIDI only works on a single track. Don't forget, we're working on 3 lanes in a track here. That's where Bounce is at its best. There is another way of merging MIDI. I'll show you that shortly. So now that we've merged all of those notes together, you can see everything's highlighted, everything's full unshaded color. Now it's easier for us to start editing this thing in total. Now the first thing that I want to do is delete any overlapping or doubled notes. That's really easy to do since we're all quantized. I can run delete doubles. I can execute delete overlaps mono, which is in the length page here. And so I'm now guaranteed not to have any overlapping notes. And then I'm pretty arbitrarily, because it's a demo and we're not particularly concerned about the exact nature of the composition, basically delete adjacent notes. So anything like the F and the 3 that are together there, I'm just going to get rid of one of them. Let's see what that sounds like. Okay, it's not going to win any Grammys, but it's good enough for today's purposes. So I've basically built a composite chord structure there. I played all of that mono, just played 3 different solo lines, merged them all together, and now I've got harmonies. Some moments of that part are actually quite nice harmonies. Now things get interesting. I can close the lanes down because we're only working with one lane. I'm going to go into my logical edit screen, and I'm going to pull up a logical edit function, extract lowest note from chord. Now, we've had a brief introduction to the logical editor, and we used it a couple of times in this course, but basically it is an absolute mine of information. Now, if you're a patron, you can actually download all of my logical edit settings. I've made them available to my patrons, but you can always take a screenshot of this algorithm if you want to copy it. What we're basically saying is we're only operating on notes if type is equal to note, and we have this context variable algorithm which allows you to basically do exactly that. It looks at the notes and performs context specific processing on them. And what it's looking for, this note number in show, is actually note number in chord lowest equals 0. What it's going to do is extract the lowest note at any given moment in time out of this part, and it's going to put it on a brand new track. So we've got the function extract, that's critical to set up, and then all I do is click apply. And you can see a bunch of notes just disappeared. Now this only works if you've got quantized starts and ends. But what it's done is it's created a brand new piece piano track. Here's our original, with fewer notes in than we started. I'm going to do it again. And now the original track Because everything that I played was in mono and I only ran 3 times around, there's no possibility that there are any doubled notes, and indeed there aren't, you can see. So what we've got now is 3 completely independent harmony lines. And the beauty of doing it this way is that the voicings are close. Now, close voicings is one of the principal heuristics of harmony. Harmony doesn't have almost any fixed rules, but one of the general principles is that close voicing is good. So by collecting these 3 solos together that were played really quite randomly, squashed all the notes together and then extracted the lowest note and then the lowest note again to create 3 separate parts, I've created lines that are more harmonically consistent. So we can listen to any one of them and it should, hopefully, sound decent. So aside from messing around with some of the lengths, that's not a bad melody. I didn't invent that melody, Chance did. Let's have a listen to one of the others. Now I think that's kind of magic. I think that's a really nice melody, that they were my fingers that played those notes, but in the words of the immortal Eric Morecambe, not necessarily in that order. This is one of the really cool tricks that I use when I'm building vocal harmonies for Pauline to sing. I'll play chords and just kind of noodle around on the keyboard and then split them up into multiple harmony lines, and you get some really interesting effects. Of course, at this point, we have completely independent instruments. There's nothing stopping us going into each of these instruments and assigning different sounds to them. So if I wanted, let's say, a woodwind sound on one of these lines, and play all 3 together. Completely drowning out the piece piano, but nevertheless you get the point. The last thing that I'm going to show you today is how to squash those 3 parts back together. Now remember earlier I said when you're working with lanes you use bounce MIDI to squash your data together. When your data is spread across multiple tracks, that doesn't work. Bounce only works if you're on a single track. But what we can do is merge MIDI. Now you need to be really careful with this function. It's called merge MIDI in loop. That's what we're going to do, but you've got to set it up properly. What you want to do is solo one of your tracks that you're interested in working with, and then solo the others. The track that's currently highlighted is going to be the destination track, so that's where all of this MIDI data is going to end up getting lumped together. Make sure that your locators are set, because the function is called merge MIDI in loop, so it'll only do the merge inside the locators. And when you've got all of that set up, click the option and you get this pop-up box. Now I always have inserts and erase destination turned on. You really want to turn this erase destination on if you're using this method, because otherwise you'll end up with copies of parts and it's all really ugly. Basically just copy those options and say OK. And now it's squashed all of that data together. See that it's left the original 2 parts alone. It's only erased the destination track. So these 2 are now spurious. We don't need them. Get rid of them. And now all of that MIDI data that had previously been split into 3 lines has all been lumped back together again. Unmute the track. That'll do us for today. Hope you've enjoyed the episode, and if you did, please hit like. I'll see you for the next one. Thanks a lot.